the book, or watch the television, or watch the movie, or watch the play. But you never do anything. You are fundamentally passive. You don't interact with what's going on. The big problem here is the intrinsic passivity of all of these art forms. What's wrong with this is the human mind is not a passive receptacle for information. The fundamental mistake we make here is the notion that the way we get things through to people is we sort of pop their skull open, pour the information in, close, shake well, and say, "Thou art educated." It doesn't work that way. The human mind is an active agent. The human mind, gee, I wonder how these glasses work. Crack, clonk, clonk. Let me bend them here and see how they work. Oh, gee, sorry about that. How does a butterfly work? I don't know. Let's rip its wings off and see. We play with things. We mess around with them. We, reach out and touch something, only we don't just touch it. We tear it apart because we are actively involved in this universe around us. We are intensely curious creatures. We want to know what's behind everything. We want to look inside it, play with it, toy with it, find out what's happening. We want to play. Our learning process, our curiosity, is intrinsically active. And the flaw in all art forms is that they force us to be passive. Now, there are damn good economic reasons why art has to be passive. After all, we can't assemble full-piece symphony orchestra for one person and then have that one schmuck say, "Stop the music, play it over again, only I'd like it a little faster this time." Sorry, that's not economically viable. So what do? We get our symphony orchestra and we get 5,000 people in the orchestra, out in the audience, so that they only have to pay $50 a head to listen to the symphony orchestra. We, economies of scale and all of that. We get one smart ass who thinks he knows what he's talking about, and he talks to everybody else. We bring as many people into the room as possible, so that we spread the cost of the information over many people. We take our one great piece of art and we try to get as many people watching it as possible, but we don't want you to go in there and slop paint with Picasso. You might distract the man. So we enforce this passivity in order to make it economically viable. But we don't have to do that with computer games anymore. We've sort of blown that away completely. The computer game doesn't force the player to be passive. The computer game allows the player to take an active role in what's happening. And that is a profoundly important change. Now, all of a sudden, we can create experiences, art, whatever you want to call it, in which the player takes an active role. That is one of these giant changes in the history of mankind. It seems very simple to us right now, and yet it is of immense import. It will change the way art works, because art has nowhere near the impact it could have when it is wasted on a passive audience. Basically, right now, I'm talking, you're listening. Because you're in a passive role, I don't have anywhere near your full attention. Your mind is far too energetic to waste its time merely listening to me. The odds are you are thinking about two or three other things right now. Why? Because it would be stupid, wasteful, to devote all of your attention to what I'm saying. I'm talking too damn slow. So you timeshare. You listen, oh, here comes another word, and oh, here comes another one. And the power of your mind working over the ideas I'm so slowly leaking out at you. But if this were an interactive situation, if I could somehow work on a one-to-one basis with each of you, and we could talk a lot faster, and you could talk and I could talk both at the same time, we could go back and forth real fast, good Lord, think how much more active you would be. Think how much more involved you would be. Think how much more rapidly we would learn from each other. It would be a much more effective process. Now, we can't do that ourselves, but we can get closer to that, a lot closer to that, with a computer. That is the profound significance of this machine. And if we do it as a game, if we say, all right, we're going to take a movie and we're going to do it on a computer and you're going to get to interact with it, then all of a sudden we have an art form where the audience doesn't sit out there 50 meters away from the screen, half involved in it. The audience is going to be right there in the middle, directly involved, participating, more than participating, interacting, doing, making it happen. And for that reason, the impact will be vastly greater. So what we've got here is something immensely powerful here. Unfortunately, it's also immensely more difficult, because what a regular artist does is a hell of a lot easier than what I am proposing we do, and I don't know how we can do it. Let me describe how a regular artist conveys an artistic message in a story, such as a story or a play or a movie, something like that. He's got his grand principle he wants to communicate to you. Let me back off for a minute. I hope you all realize Star Wars was not true. There never was a Luke Skywalker.
No, it's going to happen.
I thought all this
But wait,
That's the future.
No, it's the past.
why did millions of people go to see a lie? If it's false, why watch it? Well, the answer is that, yeah, there's truth in it, but the truth is in the principles, not in the data. That is, here we go with principles and data. Principles are the same thing as processes. Process is principle, algorithm, equation. Data is fact, image, sound, whatever. The difference between process and data is the same as the difference between a principle and a fact. Between understanding and between wisdom and knowledge. Okay? So here's George Lucas, and he says, I want to say something to the world. What am I going to say? And he decides, I'm going to say that good overcomes evil. So, then he says, let me translate that down into a form people will buy, because if I walk into the movie theater and say, all right, everybody, listen carefully. Good overcomes evil. Everyone will look at him and walk out. And so he says, I want to translate that into a form that people will believe, or whatever. So he takes it and he translates it into this story about Luke Skywalker, who was good and noble and white, and Darth Vader, who was bad and black and evil and had a deep voice. Pardon?
You always have to do the black folks.
That's Jimmy the Greek.
Anyway, so he translates it into the story about this good guy and this bad guy, and they have this conflict, and in the end, the good guy overcomes the bad guy, or however you want to translate it. Yes, 2 sequels later. Well, actually, he also overcome him in the very first one. That is, there was an initial victory the first time. So he translates his principle down to a series of events. Once upon a time, there was somebody named Luke Skywalker, and he met this old codger named Obi-Wan Kenobi, and they flew away in a spaceship together. They met Darth Vader, and Luke Skywalker ended up blowing up the Death Star, and that was the end of the movie. And that's the story. So he translates his principle down into a set of events arranged in time. And then he takes this whole pile of events and plops it in your lap. And what do? You look at the events. Gosh, look at this. There was a good guy, and there was a bad guy, and the good guy ended up beating the bad guy. Therefore, good overcomes evil. In other words, we go... Now, I'm really simplifying. But I think the main argument, the thrust of my argument, is that a movie or a story presents a series of events causally related, and we draw inferences from those things. You know, how many people walked out of Fatal Attraction and say, hey, I'm not messing with nobody, there's no other woman, man, it's just me and my wife. Well, that's an inference. The movie didn't say that if you commit adultery, these things will happen. You had just talked about this other guy. But people draw the inference. Somebody What was the comment? Somebody said that if Gary Hart had seen Fatal Attraction 2 years ago, he'd be president. So, anyway.
That's a frightening thought.
The movie that nearly destroyed a nation. Anyway, the basic idea then is, artist has principle in his mind, translates it into an expression, delivers the expression, audience experiences the expression, draws inferences, ends up coming to the principle that the artist had in mind. It's not just with stories. You know, Michelangelo carves his Pietà, Pieta, and he's telling you something about motherly love, and what you actually see. He takes that idea, translates it down into stone, and you walk up, and here's this lady holding this dead guy, you know. But you look at it, and you see the expression on your face, and you know something about human feeling, you draw these inferences about the love of a mother for her son, and so forth. So always, it's the same basic process. Start with a principle, come up with a single expression of that principle, deliver the expression to the audience, let the audience experience it, and then they draw inferences from it. In a game, we're going to do the same thing, only we're doing it, we don't go through, the intermediate step is done at runtime. In other words, we're going to take the principle, and we're going to express that in an algorithm. You want good overcomes evil? Okay. You write algorithms for how good overcomes evil. And you get all those algorithms down inside the machine. And then the player, there's a dividing line with a movie. All this stuff happens. The director of the movie does all of this stuff and gets it all done right up to this point and then delivers it over. With the computer, the player comes in a lot earlier. He comes in at the principal stage. He's going to work out his own story that is a particular manifestation of all of those principles. So we've got to capture the principles in algorithm. You want to do the equivalent of Michelangelo's Pieta? Okay. You're going to have to capture the principles of motherly love and tragedy in algorithms. Now, that may prove to be a little difficult, but that's how we're going to have to do it. So the basic idea then is we capture the principles in algorithmic form, and then we deliver the algorithms. And then the player starts up the game, and the algorithms begin to take a manifestation. They express themselves in some particular way. The player interacts with the algorithms, interacts with the principles you built in directly. And so he can get whatever flavor he wants. It will still be true to your message. If you've done your algorithms properly, you're never going to have Darth Vader beating Luke Skywalker. But maybe the pattern, the format, whatever, the exact sequence of events, that is created by the player. So the player still creates by himself the data, the manifestation, the expression, but you are still in control of the principle. In other words, what we're talking about is one level of indirection removed, where the movie director takes his stuff, moves down a level of indirection to a specific case, presents that, and then the audience moves up a level of indirection. We're going to have the indirection in our heads. We've got to do all of that ourselves. We have to imagine all possible good versus evil stories and express them all in a series of algorithms. I freely admit this is completely beyond my imagination how to do this. The best I can do right now is talk about it. But I will also claim that this is how we can do art out in games. And this is the general direction in which we must move if we are to have art in games. I also freely admit it will take many, many years. I am dubious that any of us will ever live to see a decent piece of art done in the form of a computer game. Anything that compares with the work of Charlie Chaplin, Michelangelo. But we can start. So, any questions? rather depressing series of thoughts. Actually, I don't look at this point of view as depressing at all. Well, it is exalting to me, the thought that we can do someday, maybe not me myself, but we as a community, if we work on it, can do art that's going to, basically, we're going to put a parking lot over Beethoven, Michelangelo, Chaplin, all these people. We're going to leave them in the dust. We go a few centuries down the road. I think we're going to put most of the other art forms out of business because they just can't touch us in terms of impact. When we really learn how to do computer games properly, people are going to look at all the other art forms and say, why should I be so passive when I can be a part of it myself and directly experience the artist's great message? But I also, that's going to take a few centuries. So, I'm an optimist. I look at it and say, think of what could be, not how long it will take.
Another question. Use of algorithms. When you started doing that, or when you, over the time you've been developing games, was that something that you evolved from tables to algorithms because it was easier to modify, change the program or modify a behavior? For instance, like I was saying, you know, add wildness and craziness, and you get this wild craziness factor, et cetera, et cetera. Did that come out of the ability to change the program easier as you were programming it, or is that just something that you sat down and said, okay, this is better because of what you just told us? And if that's the case, how do you come up with these shift left twice and add this to this and add that to that? I mean, it's kind of like, let's just pull things from the wheel.
Okay. This is the way I think. That is, I don't think in terms of equations, but just part of the way I look at the world. There's a wonderful, Galileo had a beautiful quote, which I am sure I'll screw up. The entire universe is captured in a glass of wine. And what he meant by that was that all of the principles, everything that holds the stars in the sky and makes the rain come down and animals work and trees grow, all of those laws of physics are caught in a single glass of wine. The worldview here that I'm driving at is the notion that that the universe works on principles. That is, it's ideas, equations, it's forces that I don't quite want to say physics. It is laws for how everything works. And if you know the laws, pardon? If you know the laws, you don't need to memorize any of the data. I derive almost everything on the fly. I remember as little as possible. For example, many times I'll stop and ask myself, what's the syntax of that command? And I can never remember. And so I always jump back and say, well, there's only one way it could be done. Because if it's going to work, it's got to have an argument like this, and then it'll have to have an argument like that, and the argument has to be 60 bits. And I rederive the syntax because there's really only one best way it could be done anyway. So I just refigure out how it has to be rather than try to memorize what it is. If you go through life trying to memorize everything, your mind's going to fill up real quick. There are just too many details out there. So basically, what I try to do is just learn the basic principles that make things run. Now, if you think that way, if you concentrate on that, then when I look at something like balance of power, I start off thinking about it, and I say, what are the principles for how nations interact? Well, there's this principle, and then they've got to do that. And I am already thinking in terms of algorithms. And so really, it's a matter of organizing those principles, expressing it in a mathematical form, which is always fairly easy. I mean, you just say, well, this is going to increase monotonically, and you sort of scribble, what should the curve look like? Well, I know it should look roughly like that, because I know when it gets real big, it's got to level off. Okay, well, what's a formula that's that rough shape? So, if you understand the principle, then you just sort of grab an equation that's roughly parallel to the principle. And then later on, maybe you have to twist and adjust and bend a little bit. But the important thing is to concentrate on those principles. Does that answer your question?
Einstein once said, why memorize something when you can look it up in a book?
Yeah, yeah. Data are meant to be kept in books. The mind is meant to think. And so, always, I always try to remember things by what causes them.
And it sums it up right there, looking at the causes of something rather than the ultimate effects, you know. If you design a game by what you want to see on the screen as opposed to what causes it to be there, you're much more limited. Yeah. Never mind. Quick little.
Actually, I'm still coping with.
Coping is the key word.
Coping is, you know. Let's take the computer away for a moment, and use a device that has good I/O and as we have. So, okay, I'll sit in the chair and you sit over there.
Okay.
Okay. Now I'd like to do a simulation, you know, sans the computer, and I'll pretend I was programmed, and let's do a simulation of what this ideal situation would be, this ideal interaction. If we could do that, then we could move more directly toward coming up with what the computer should do. And I'm having a very, very hard time within our traditional frame. Most artistic expression, even though it's passive, has an incredible richness.
Okay.
Okay, which derives from it being done out of real time. Okay, with the exception of, let's say, and there are a few highly interactive, what you might, well, some people will say art is art, some people won't. Some people say jazz is not art, okay, because it has no depth. Beethoven is depth because he spent 6 months writing a 20-minute piece of music. Okay, they spent 2 years making Star Wars, hundreds and hundreds of people, and many resources made 120 minutes. Okay, and as passive as that may be, the richness and depth of the experience makes up a lot for its passivity. Now, okay, so I want to get back to our real-time example.
Okay. I have an example for you.
Okay.
I think I'm satisfying this. Correct me if I'm wrong. What you want is black box over here that has the expressive. Let's imagine we're going to take an android, or we're going to take a human being and sort of partially gut this human being. You know, the lobotomy of some sort. So we're going to treat this as a computer.
Wire for sound. Okay.
Yeah, something like that. So it's capable of absorbing the input and it's capable of speaking. The I/O capabilities are still strong. And then we've got a 6502 running the brain, something
Terminator.
like that. Okay. Now, how do we get art out of this? I can give you one example. The human being is a little girl, 5 years old, walks up and says, "Daddy, tell me a story." And Daddy says, "Once upon a time, there was a beautiful little 5-year-old girl." And the girl says, "Oh, wow." And the little girl, and Daddy says, "And the little girl went for a walk in the woods." And the girl responds to it. And basically, we get this interactive storytelling where little girl is reacting. Daddy is watching her actions and tailoring this story just to her. And when the bad thing happens, little girl acts a little more scared than Daddy intended. So, Daddy says, "A wolf jumps out at her," and she goes, "Oh no!" Says, "But the wolf turned out to be her friend." And so now we're getting a deeply interactive thing going on, where the game is deeply aware of what's important to the player, partially because of pre-knowledge, let us assume, and but also the ability to read the emotions and the voice intonation and so forth. Lots of rich I/O going out, just telling the story that a big wolf jumped out and so forth. And we're getting deep interaction because the 5-year-old still has a lot of control over how this story is coming out. She gets to move in whatever direction, but Daddy is still in control of the artistic message. He's not going to end up telling her a story about how the little girl saw a stranger and said, "Oh, stranger, here, take me away and do terrible things to me." He's going to tell her a story that in some way is morally uplifting and so forth. So each of them is getting the control he wants. I mean, there's a game. Fair enough?
Yeah, yes, yeah, that's fair.
Actually, that answer is a little too clever to suit me.
Yeah,
That was too easy. That was too sneaky.
Chris, the problem I'm having is that's about the only scenario that I can come up with that would suit the nature of this interactive thing. Because I want to tell you about, let's say I want to come with a message like Star Wars, okay? But I have a certain amount of, I want to own some of these things that I want to objectify this message with. I'm really pretty tied to the character of Luke Skywalker. Not only am I tied to my algorithm, but I'm reasonably tied to my data. I kind of like that. It's part of my artistic message. Now, if I have to be totally interactive with you, and I say, and so I'm telling, let's go back, I'm telling you a story, and Luke Skywalker comes, oh, not another Luke Skywalker story. Tell me something about Dirty Freddy. There goes my interactive, I was like, blow it out of the water. Hold it, I prepared pages of Luke Skywalker. And you don't want to hear it. End of interaction, goodbye.
Is that because you're being too narrow about it? That is, if I'm groping
It's going to cease
here.
to be a game.
But are you?
But you're back to a movie.
It's going to just be an interactive. It's
of the
going to
game.
turn into Stooges. It's going to be an interactive movie. It's not even a game anymore.
Yeah.
Well, that's
what
what
I
I'm
would
getting at.
argue-
What the difficulty is here.
Because it's giving the message.
What I would argue
The
is
Stooge algorithm is pretty complex. No, it's not inside of that.
Clearly, algorithm is
That damn algorithm. It takes 2 or 3 volumes.
It has many manifestations. So I don't care whether I tell it about Dirty Freddy or Luke
Okay,
Skywalker.
the minute I introduce
Poignancy and voice.
getting tied to something more than the principle, the manifestation of the principle, there becomes a problem. And I would suggest that, that art now, there is an underlying theme to an awful lot of stuff. However, an awful lot of things that I guess that's at the point where you can, if you want to start drawing a line between, well, it's a good example for only a few people who know, the difference between Miami Vice and Manhunter. I don't know if you're familiar with either of them. Both by the same guy. Miami Vice is the TV show. Michael Mann directs that. Manhunter is a movie directed by Michael Mann. Miami Vice, both of them I think are done with reasonably the same content, same level of expertise. Miami Vice has little or no message from Michael Mann personally. He just does it. Okay, and so you could draw the line and say there's no art in Miami Vice. There is art in Manhunter. He came with some very strong messages that he wanted to do, and he very skillfully puts them into his thing. So I guess what you're, by denying attachment to your objectification, you're just saying that an artist really basically has the principle. That's basically what makes it art.
Yeah.
And if I just give you stuff, objects, if I just give you a endless series of Luke Skywalker's, Dirty Harrys, and people that are pretty much devoid of an algorithm, then that would pretty much deny it art status.
Yeah, if there's no causal issues there, if it's just random events.
But gee, more people watch Miami Vice than Manhunter, if you know what I'm getting at. And often the people aren't really interested in even being processed by any art, even as a passive
You're
medium.
judging art quantitatively, I think.
I have to.
We are getting into one very dangerous. Nobody has asked the killer question yet. The question that just blows the entire discussion out of the water and dissolves us all down to anarchy, and that is, what is art? And
We know better
as
than
soon as we
ask.
get to that, everything just dissolves because nobody has ever been able to answer that question. I certainly. So I suppose the defense I'll make there is simply the observation that art need not be elitist, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star is art just as much as Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. It expresses a feeling. Is that a definition of art? Well, not a very good one, but it gets us in the ballpark. And so I'm willing to say, yeah, there's an artistic component to Miami Vice. I mean, it's about people, and it's about their interactions, and it says something about the way people are. That's good enough for me. I'm not that picky. I mean, we've got so little. I'll take Miami Vice.
Well, I put those two because they're by the same person, and I would say he does this one mechanically. I say, you know, of course there are things that could be, you could say, as art about Miami Vice, but basically he does the mechanics. There's a car chase scene. There are good guys, there are bad guys, but it's not his message. You know, it's network policy. Good guys don't win. Good guys win, bad guys get punished. That's in the network book on what you can show on TV. It has no art coming from him as the person who's in charge of the project. Whereas Manhunter obviously had some, he wrote the script. It had some deeply held personal feelings, which I would say is the algorithm.
Then the network is the
artist.
Yeah, the network says, here are the artistic principles we're going to convey. Good guys win, there will be a car chase scene. You know.
That's why they call it programming. Oh God, what if write NBC as artist? I've never thought of art.
Portrait of the artist as a
We
television.
haven't defined good art and bad art. We're just discussing art.
Yeah, I mean, in the computer games biz, it'll be a few centuries before we can start talking about the difference between good art and bad art and so forth. I think we're in a position where we'll take anything we can get.
But I think computer games have already said something, at least about greed.
Right.
Okay.
I think in art, in terms of the art of gameplay, the art of sounds, the art of computer graphics on
visuals.
It's something that's very well decided every day. If it's not good, it's a commercial failure.
Okay, I'll agree to that, and I'll agree there is art.
Commercial success.
I'll agree there is artistry in those tactical level decisions of what the sound sounds like and what the screen looks like. There's undeniably artistry in it. Is it art? Well, it does communicate something.
You have to say that. I mean, David's written several tunes that play out of computers, and he could have written those same tunes and played them on an instrument.
I'm not denying that it is art. It does evoke feelings, and that meets my minimum definition of art. If it evokes feelings, it is in some way artistic.
I believe art evokes feelings.
Okay.
Anger.
Frustration.
Well, I mean, art. If you look at Space Invaders, which was really about 10 years ago, 1978, which was black and white moving blips, back and forth, and you look at a game like Outfront, the amazing amount of artistic control by the computer, the amazing amount of raw art makes the product look almost like a lifelike simulator. Art so good that it simulates a life.
But that's the difference between art and imagery.
Yeah,
that's imagery. There's lots of imagery that looks really good. If art says anything, is there any message or any intent by anybody in Outrun to say anything other than I can make a moving picture that looks realer than you can? Yeah. I mean, that's to me like the only message in Outrun at all is that I can, look what I can make a moving image that is marginally interactive.
Technology.
Well, yeah, I mean, art as some form of expression, I think there is some expression in the game design of Centipedes.
I think
Ed says something to me.
Xenophobe
says something.
I think it does too. It's not all the way there. It's not even close to what you're talking about. But it's a little bit further along the line because now you've got. I mean, the name of it, xenophobe, is kind of ironic. I mean, and plus there's all kinds of weird characters, and the characters have actual names, and there's a little bit more to it.
But
and it's slowly moving.
In alignment with Chris, I would say, yeah, there can be artistic. I try to express myself, and my self-expression is glued onto a video game. Okay, but I would think what Chris is asking for is that the essential interaction that's being done by the programmer can carry a message. needs to carry a message. He should be expressing himself. He shouldn't just be shoveling data to a screen and making an animation work. It's how you make it work, what you have the animation do. Not only just its content, but in the way you have it do it in terms of its interaction with the person. That is an area it's only been marginally dealt with. There usually isn't time.
People walk away from a movie grabbing the principles. Do they walk away from Outrun with grabbing that principle of that game? Well, I would have made a left here. Yeah. I made a left at Albuquerque or something.
So I mean, that's the difference between it's, you know, why it perhaps is not an art yet. However, I think there have been games that have carried a very subtle message. If nothing else, greed doesn't pay.
So does the Stooges have a message?
John Cutter's a jerk.
No, it's good versus evil.
That's I mean, even
yeah, but evil sometimes
But
wins.
it's so.
Yeah.
That's
No.
evil
Evil
it says.
Or is, you know, maybe maybe there wasn't a big message in it, but sometimes I think you can take something that doesn't have a message and it's not so hard to put a message in.
Well, like
Ours?
I'm a
This
big
is our
Hitchcock
10-month
fan.
baby. This took one longer than a normal baby.
Well, I'm a big Hitchcock
We get several
fan.
people
All of his films
We sure
are
got
so
screwed
richly
enough.
dense. Every scene has items in it. I mean, you can watch it over and over again and find new things to glean from.
Well, you got to find out where he is first off.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be nice to have that same density and richness of detail in a computer game?
Well,
To
in
play
fact,
over and over and glean new things.
it's odd that you should say that because I have always felt that a fundamental difference between a story and a game is replayability. And yet what you're observing here is that the Hitchcock movies are so detailed you can go back and watch it over and over and get more out of it. And gee, wouldn't it be nice if games would do that? That really expresses how bad a job we've done on games, because a game should be vastly more replayable than a story. It's just we haven't learned how to really make that story net really bushy yet.
I think it depends on the person and the product. There are some games that are just loaded to the hilt with hidden things, and the deeper you get into it, gee, I didn't know I could do this, and no, I couldn't do that, and many things that aren't apparent to the player. I look at Arcane, and the deeper you get in the game, the more rewarding it becomes.
Well,
Atari has a new
but
blast
they're
story.
always.
The deeper you go, the more variables there are.
But it's always a functional kind of thing. It's not kind of an emotional.
Oh, no,
You know what I
that's
mean?
not true. I must have played, I'll just bare my soul, I must have played Robotron 5,000-6,000 times. It's a 3-minute game. Now I think, and it's not because,
Did you pay for this?
no, I've never paid, I probably paid $4 worth of Robotron, but I would pay $300 to have one in my basement. And it's not because I enjoy this pure, the mechanics of this or looking at that. It's because I have discovered the underlying game design that these guys put in it. And it's more than just a puzzle. It's a very dynamic puzzle. And you get to a plateau, and now I'm looking for the next mode of play, which will move me up to a next spiritual karmic level in playing Robotron or Centipedes. The only two pieces that I credit with that much real game design genius that I particularly like. And I really think it's there. Because it's much more than, oh, I'm successfully doing this. This is really hip. Look at my score, how big it's getting.
You have to take the mothballs off those two games for you, huh?
Right, no, it's because I've discovered what Eugene and Larry, how they were trying to get me off the game. I've discovered what that is. You know, that was one of their hidden underlying algorithms. It's not a hard fact and it's not a rule. I've discovered a principle of Robotron gameplay. Woohoo, I know that one. Now I'm going up and I'm going 5 or 6 screens deeper. And I'll do that for a while till, I can practice that. Oh, I've discovered a new Robotron principle. It's a way of coping with it and not a hard, fast rule. And those are in there.
Oh, even
And I think there are still more rules. Richard knows more than I do.
Not very few games have that. I mean, Centipede,
That's
just by the
correct.
fact that you take 3 really successful Centipede players, and, well, a lot of them do use the same technique, but I've seen several completely different strategies against that game that work just as well. I mean, totally, there's very few video games, arcade games that I've seen where you can use more than one strategy.
Each
But it's still
player
going
gets to
back.
write his way.
This is
Gets to
still
read his
right.
way.
That's what I was about to say. This is still going back to the same thing. That if it were like a movie, there'd be only one, or an Infocom game, there would be only one way to play it. And a good game is going to have a lot of different ways of playing it that will give you equally good results.
But I think Centipede is a very good example of that, because even as an arcade game goes, a lot of them it's figuring out. It may not be an Infocom linear story, but it's still basically figuring out what the programmer had in mind.
But I think one of the functions of great art is to make you essentially reassess your reality, and I don't think you get that out of a video game. I mean, if you go to a Hitchcock film, he challenges your perceptions about morality and death, and you don't see that.
But does it?
You could do that. You could do that in a game.
But is that necessary? I mean, can't a game be, and I guess I use the word simply an experience that you can come away from saying, I have experienced something that I will never be able to experience someplace else. The pinball machine that these guys have worked on for the past few months is an experience that you will walk away from, and your head will be spinning, and you'll be just going nuts for a while. It's an experience. The flight simulator, as boring as that may have been, I mean, I putted around that thing for a good many hours, and I flew around the Statue of Liberty, and I landed here and did this. But it wasn't so much that it was entertaining or that I came away with some message. I came away with that saying, man, this was an experience. And my spine tingled at the thought that I could sit in front of my television set, holding a joystick, and put myself in a place that normally I can't be. This is a place that I could not have been earlier on today or a week ago, but I went out and bought my $50 flight simulator, and now I can be there anytime I want.
So it's kind of the sensation that you get out of a roller coaster.
I play Tim's rip-off game. I play Tim's rip-off game. I am certainly not out. Whatever is that in space? I'm not even sure what the scenario is.
Originally, there was supposed to. You can tell by looking at the side art. There was originally supposed to be a mirrored cabinet with reflecting onto a playfield. It was originally, these were moon rovers on the surface of the moon. It's on this, big parking lot.
Big black parking lot.
Bill and I.
If you see 2001, that pit where they go down and where it's the monolith, that was basically the idea.
Wow. We play that game, and we get it, and we become space cowboys, and we're yeehawing, and we're carrying on and yelling and screaming. But this is an experience. Art doesn't necessarily have to convey a message. It can put you in a place.
It's more of a sport than it is art in a sense. You know?
And sometimes I think we look too far, and we dig too deeply, and we just overlook the obvious. What's fun? What's enjoyable? What causes your spine to tingle?
Roller coasters.
There's nothing. I'm not saying that any of those things are bad or should be avoided or should be put down because they're not hooty-tooty art for me. What I'm saying is that we can get the hooty-tooty art. We can get Alfred Hitchcock type stuff, and that will be, in my mind, that will be a greater achievement. Maybe I feel that only because I can't do that. You know, this mountain looks more interesting because I've never climbed it, but it will take a long, long time.
I don't say this. I'm going to say something. Not because I don't believe it can be done, but is the computer if something can do it well, like movies, books, television, even in some cases, is the computer the right thing for that?
It's a good point. One of the problems with
one
of the problems with all media is that they tend to reflect the media that went before them. Movies were a reflection of the stage. I mean, and this is a very literal sense. They just film stage play. And theater is films are just recapitulation of that, and television is a recapitulation of films at best. Actually, they went all the way back to theater and came back forward again. There is a good question there. When you hit quad sound,
I agree.
You hit a point where it isn't appropriate anymore.
We should not try to compete with other forms. This is the biggest objection to cinemaware. Trying to deliver a movie on a computer is really dumb. What we can deliver that a movie can't deliver is the interaction.
Okay, but like now David's point, if I'm going to interact with your message, then what is your message? Had you stood here today and lectured for 8 hours, and every time you tried to get a sentence out, I stood up and stomped up and down and said, no, I don't want to hear that sentence, what would have been gained?
Nothing. But if I had been alone in a room with you, and you had wanted to interact with me, that is, I start talking, you say, but wait a minute, and we go back and forth, and we start having a real interactive conversation, we would both have gotten a great deal more out of it than this arrangement where it is sort of big fan out. It's economics.
I see it more winding up being more educational than artistic. You still get more of a feeling of here it is teaching you these principles more than
What's the
Movies
more
difference
than
between
experiencing them. I don't know.
There's a real fuzzy area
I don't know.
between education and art. Art,
Yeah,
in many
but it
ways,
does
tends
seem
to
to be-
educate the user about the nature of humanity.
Sure, but it does seem to be leaning a lot more towards the educational, like you will learn this.
Okay.
Here's my principle.
Here,
Take
I have
it.
about 5,000 ways of you learning this, but this is what you're
Yeah,
going
this
to
is
learn.
what you're going to learn. It's forcing
Or
it
maybe I
down
have
here.
100
Well, there's
million
nothing wrong with
ways.
learning in an educational way. That in itself is artistic.
No. If all the theories we
I mean,
talked
you're-
about are true, then every
All art.
movie
Every movie.
and every
Yeah.
you know, play and every book that has a principle to say or an expression to evoke
the
is
way it-
education.
It's the way that it's expressed.
Well,
That's
well,
really
it
art.
is part of it, but it's a matter of degree, I think.
Well, why do you think people go to these things? They're curious.
Right.
Why do they go to what?
Why do people go to
Movies.
these things? Movies.
Well, also
They
you
want
don't
to
have
be
to always.
educated.
I mean,
What?
after a
Really
movie,
educated. And why do they play games?
They want to
Because
see
it's
something that they don't
entertaining.
normally see every day, and that's why they go. You can't go and see spaceships every day, so you go see Star Wars and you fly through space.
And,
You can't
and
normally
why
do
is
that.
that good? I would maintain that the
That's
reason
over a
people
bypass.
like to go to strange places, to fly airplanes around the Statue of Liberty, is because they're curious. Wow, it was really neat finding out what it was like flying around. It was really neat finding out what it would be like to fly in a spaceship, even though they don't,
As
quite
much
exist.
curiosity as escapism?
well, it's
So-
fun.
Yeah, there are all these other psychological factors, the escapism and fantasy and so forth, but curiosity is another one. I didn't
So-
realize
so
that.
the
Well,
interactive-
I think what I'm saying though is that, and I don't disagree that it can't be done in an artistic way. That's not the argument. But I would like to see more talk on how we can take full advantage of what the computer has to offer in terms of its being able
Yes.
to present an experience that no other, not movies, not television, what have you. The computer has the ability of creating an experience, creating an atmosphere, more so than probably anything else. Because you can change that. You can change your environment. You have direct control of your environment.
Okay.
You, the player.
The danger when you use the experiential line of thinking, when you say what we're really trying to do is present an experience here, is that there is an intrinsic bias in that wording towards a non-interactive style. That is, I'm going to present you with an experience rather than you are going to create it yourself. Now, I'm not saying you can't have an
Yeah.
experience with interaction.
It's just dangerous.
I'm saying that it's just different ways of wording. We're driving at the same thing. And I'm just warning you that when you word it that way, that tends to lean you away from the interaction, from the interactive element, which is the central thing, the component that really makes it fly on the computer.
You can take an airplane ride in those large screen movies like Great America or something and fly around Statue of Liberty just as you can on a flight simulator,
But you're not
And it's
controlling
more
your
realistic.
environment there.
Right,
You're not
right.
controlling your environment.
right, but it's the interactiveness that sets the computer apart.
That's true.
So the interactive movie really is the goal. It's just that Cinemaware has already begun to poison the term.
Oh yeah.
But that really is what we're sort of striving for here. It's just that
Yeah,
it's
be
just
one
that
of the
they're
characters.
going the wrong way.
It's
I'd
rich.
like to think.
Well, I look at
Right,
the term
they're
interactive
emphasizing
movie
movie.
in much the same way there was a term around 1903 regarding, for movies, they were, the French set up this big commission that was gonna, they called them recorded, or cinematically recorded plays or something like that. And the basic idea was they didn't understand what a movie was, so they described a movie in terms of an existing technology, a play. And I think when we look at games and call them interactive movies, we're struggling in the same way. Someday, we're just going to be able to say, it's a game, and everybody will know what that is. But right now, we're all groping.
Well, I think
Yeah,
the
but
way
why-
it's done though.
I take a
because-
movie and make it interactive. Why make interactive life or whatever,
But
some
you-
experience? Why?
Okay.
Say,
I'm
why
just saying
grab a
that
movie?
usually is the way it's done. Like movie was first called a photo play because it was a play, except that it was
I think
cinematic.
we were
So you're
doing-
right. That's not the right progression to call it an interactive movie because it really is it's parallel. It's
We were
not
doing a lot
evolved
better
from it.
off before we had the technology to even attempt another medium. A computer was a very bad mirror with respect to previous mediums because it was so different. So previous, with the exception of board games, things that tried to be a board game, which we know is not maybe the best idea. Most successful computer games, with few exceptions, weren't nearly as derived from existing medium as other medium had been upon their introduction because the computer was so different. We're now entering the danger zone as the computer gets powerful enough. It can now attempt to mimic stuff it should never have been doing in the first place. Up until now, we were in the safety zone, you know, so you wouldn't even attempt to have tried to do an interactive movie on a C64, though, you know, we're trying now, God forbid. But you wouldn't even have thought to have done it until the Amiga. Now you have real digitized images, now you got great big discs, now you can put up some number of images that begins to have some pretense as a movie. And try to buy some of those values and sucker people into this as, oh, this is a movie, except it's interactive.
I mean, I think Cinemware has just taken a very smart marketing position among products out there and just tried to create a niche. Whether their product is really a true cinematic, interactive movie, it's just somebody had a real smart marketing concept.
Yes.
And I think, you know, you're almost being overly harsh on what they're, you know, I doubt they're saying they're. I don't know that. Maybe they're saying we are MGM of computers.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, originally they were applying cinematic concepts to interactive stories, and now they've really elevated themselves to, I think.
See, we live with the hard
the
reality
future
of
of
what they're willing
the
to
world.
sacrifice in order to bring those cinematic characters,
Well, they're willing to
qualities
sacrifice
on
the
board. Yeah, they're willing to sacrifice everything. Throw the baby out. Just keep the bathwater. We don't even need that. We just want to have the killer title screen. We want to establish some characters. Whether you can do anything with the characters, well, we know it's a game. It's got to have some gameplay. Okay, we know that. But we really want this introduction, okay? And we want to establish these characters, and we want to do all these cinematic things. You got like 20K left? Can you get a game in there? I mean, this is their attitude, and it's not enamored us, being that we want to put out what we know is to be good product.
Sure.
Because we're going to have to live. Our name and our royalties are going to be based on this product going out.
Right.
And we know the path they're going down is bogus.
But arose by
And maybe
any other name
maybe
is
they'll be successful for a little while. And maybe we'll make
Yeah.
royalties on this.
Maybe
thing.
they'll
I
be
hope.
but you know, maybe they'll be successful
But-
for a long while. We don't know.
Maybe that
this.
bad hasn't dropped off yet.
Cartridge from Rice from great.
Right, but you know what? I think that we enjoy. Do we enjoy that game as much as we enjoy other games that we play around here? I mean, we want to do stuff we really.
10 years from now, people will not be playing the Stooges.
Yeah.
Okay? No.
No.
Whereas 10 years from now, you know, there's probably other games, right now I can think of an example, that still have survived. I still find myself occasionally playing the original adventure game, which is really crude in some ways, but there's something about it that's fun. It's a classic.
When was the last time you played Star Raiders? War Space?
Activision VCS games.
Well, you know,
How about Centipede? That's still a great one. Great game
I
to play.
think with the exception of
Some of the graphics I don't
a
like.
few very special games, most games, whether they be a Cinemaware game or the greatest epics game ever made, they're going to be short-lived, and they're going to have their 6 months on the hot side of the product sheet. They're going to have their 6 months coming down. They're going to have their final 6 months in the closeout bin, and the product's going to be over.
That's one way. That's one way it can be done.
Right.
And then there's the Galagas of the world that
Sure.
are clear big earner, or not big earner, but constant earner for
Sure,
years.
and
That's
there are a
typical
few of them.
movies
There
are
are
the
5
same
of
way.
them. Maybe there are 10 of
Microsoft
them.
Flight Simulator.
There aren't that many of them.
And balance of power.
No,
That's
there aren't
true.
that many of them.
That's
But
the
wouldn't
problem.
it be desirable
It's
to
the
be
one
one of
something
them?
to strive for.
Yeah,
I'd rather
That's
have
the
one
point.
of those than 10 of these weekly things.
Looking at the coin-op business stuff over the past 3 years, no one has had the tremendous success of a 30 or 40,000 piece run, with maybe the exception of Double Dragon. But the guys that have been successful have been the guys that have said, there's a small pocket. I know if I do this right product, I'm going to blap out 3,000 units and it's going to be over. And then somebody else looked and said, hey, there's a segment of a basketball game, or there's a segment of a driving game, or, you know, right now our market, and I even believe probably the consumer market, which I don't know that much about, is if you aim your product right, you're going to go out and you'll sell your 100,000 units and it'll be over, but it'll be better than selling 30,000 units for 5 years. We'll sell 100,000 and be gone.
Well, I think that there's a
publishers.
there's a fundamental difference between the home market and the coin-op market. Coin-op, you know, novelty and coin-op sort of go hand in hand. Coin-op is really really gets down to the carnival. Get to the carnival, it's a big long line of guys standing here. Come here, come here, come here, come here, play me. Point out, is that automated? And so novelty is the key concept in this, and you wouldn't expect anything to last. I mean, it's only the anomalies that have lasted any time. Most carnival hucksters have to move on to a new game.
Sure. How many flight simulators are probably out there now?
Lots, but
And
that
how-
one still selling.
and how many more are probably going to be out there the next year?
At least one more.
Okay. How many products like Stooges are out there right now?
What's the product like, Stu?
How many products
What do
are
you-
out there that are as pretty, sound as good, give you as quick a dynamic? Wow, there goes Larry Curly Mo, and there goes the yada yada da 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 da. There's the Columbia Lion, and there, you know, how many are out there like that?
I mean,
Hopefully not
Well, see,
many.
Stooges, like you pointed out, but Stooges is very artsy. Whether you want to say it or whether it's fun or not isn't the question. There's
It
an
evokes emotion and humor.
And if you're,
Yeah,
if
it
you like
does
the
evoke
you
a
like
humor,
Three
that's
Stooges,
there's a lot of laughs and there's a lot of.
It's a novelty. Yeah.
I mean, how many times have you seen a game where you said,
People might be.
I don't
playing
understand why anybody plays that, and the thing makes money or gets sold, and it's like, yuck, what trash. I think, you know, there's an individual's taste out there that's going to like the Stooges.
Oh,
I'm sure they will.
I'm
A lot
not
of them.
ashamed of it.
No,
We're
not at
all
all.
proud
I mean,
of it.
I just think the people in this room, and I like to hope myself is included, are people that consider themselves much better game players, game designers, gamesmen, games people, games whatever. There's also that Roy Robinson, and I use Roy Robinson as kind of my prime example. He's the guy that makes all of our wire ramps for our pinball machines. Roy has a C64. He's one step less than a halfer. He just likes to. He's very happy that he plays wrestling, and he's even more excited that he happens to have the instructions to it. Because most of the games he has, he doesn't.
The game he has instructions for he likes.
Yeah.
Roy Robinson is going to be a person that's going to place the Three Stooges, and he's going to get an absolute incredible
version, right?
a pirate
Yeah, but will he
version
buy
of
one?
it. He's going to be one of the people out there that's going to get a rush out of that type of product because he doesn't have to think a lot. And it's the end of the day, and he's going to just do his minimal amount of work to do something besides watch the VCR, spend time with his wife, or or sit in front of the TV.
But do you want a game that's going to have that peak and drop off or again?
I
You got a collection of games that are, as you were saying, grow actually in royalties over the years.
I think time's going to tell.
You can't tell on something that's a novelty that's not been tried. You can't really predict it 100%. Well, we're going to design this game so that it's going to be around for 10 years. I mean, you can try,
Overall,
but you can't be guaranteed.
the industry, publishers want something by Christmas. And they don't give enough time to really sit back and design what you feel is a very solidly designed game
There's an old
that is
expression.
going to be a classic or whatever. You have to quickly crank out these fads. Without the Three Stooges license, what would this game be?
Well, it's nothing. But what you have to remember is you have to keep in mind is the distinction between what's actually good and what will sell. What you think is good and what's going to sell. If you're in it to make money, sometimes you have to make things that you know will make money, even if you hate it.
On licenses, there's an old expression: if you want to make money fast or you want to make it slow, I'd rather make it fast. And if you're going to sell a lot of units in 6 months as opposed to maybe the same amount of units in 5 years, I'd sure rather sell the more units in 6 months.
But would you rather sell a lot of units in 6 months or 4 times that in 5 years?
There's clearly going to be that. There's clearly going to be that game that's going to be the exceptional game that's going to go out there and earn for 5 years. And for 5 years, people are going to buy winter games, and winter games are going to, gee, now the Olympics are coming up, and maybe they'll throw a different wrapper on the package, and they'll say, the 1988 Olympics are here. Winter games, practice your skills as the guys do it on TV. And yes, there's that exceptional product, but how many of those exceptional products are there? There are 2 a year.
You don't want sales to be your sole criteria. I mean, you want to
Just can't know.
you want to be be something that you're proud of.
That's what I was just saying. Was you have to make a distinction between that. What you're going to sell and make money from. What you actually
Are
want.
they
believe-
mutually exclusive?
You want to believe that artistic, well thought out game will sell.
Yes.
And
But
Rand.
Given
Yes.
the time it
Would
took.
want to
I
believe
certainly like to think so.
I think I have proven by my experience that a well done game that a designer can be proud of can also sell well.
Yes.
It is true.
Yeah.
I have known.
Yes, it
yeah,
will.
I have known some good ones that I always think of Murder on the Cinder Knife, which was a very creative game and had a lot of good ideas in it that bombed. The bombing of Mule didn't bomb, but it wasn't a big
Mule
success.
was a good
Mule, I
game.
feel, is the finest home computer game ever designed. It deserved to be a smash hit. It wasn't. It was a moderately successful game, and that was a crime.
But look at like Billy Budge's Pinball.
Okay, yeah.
Which is not a great game, not a great pinball game, not even a great toolkit game, but has sold year after year.
There will always be junk that sells very well. That doesn't demoralize me too much. I get jealous when I see some piece of garbage, selling 100,000 units. But that's just petty jealousy.
Well,
what's important is that good stuff have a clear shot at it, and good stuff frequently fails, but good stuff can sell well.
But I mean, how can you say junk?
yeah, you're missing a point.
I mean, I understand what you're saying. In your opinion, it's junk. But those hundreds of thousands of people that are out there enjoying it may not well be junk.
Roy's going to have a great time.
Let me think.
Check book,
Like
kitchen, recipe junk.
I burn Shirley as junk, but on the other hand, if I were in the business of writing television sitcoms, I think I would try to figure out why people watched Laverne and Shirley before I went.
You can't dismiss it.
Okay, I'll give you an
It's
example.
great, but it's syndicated quite well.
The Atari ET cartridge for the VCS. Are we all agreed that was junk?
Yeah, but nobody bought it.
Yes, they did.
They did sell a lot of
It got
units.
advanced
Store I
sales,
worked in sold.
it turned into landfill.
They did.
All right, well, the
But
store
they
I
still,
worked in, they sold
that was
lots.
because they overbuilt. They thought they were going to sell 10 million units. In practice, I think they sold 5 million. Unfortunately, they built 10 million. So that's a lot of landfill. But they still sell a lot of units.
I don't think you can classify Stooges as
Well,
lesser
my point
than
is-
or anything else. It's a different set. You have to look at the market and positioning, and from a marketing standpoint, it's a different position one occupies in the battle of the mind of the consumer. If there are 12 flight simulators out there, and there's one Stooges, and you got a new flight simulator and there's one Stooges, I'll tell you what game's going to get the shelf space on the store. Stooges.
Well, it tastes great and it's
Flight simulators could sell them.
When you're when you're talking about any kind of game design, especially in a commercial marketplace, of course you want to design something you can be proud of, and especially you like to design something that does something new. I mean, what's the point of inventing something if it's already been invented? And generally speaking, you can only judge the product by your own reaction to it. So of course you're going to want to create something that you yourself like. But in addition to all of those factors, all of which we've been talking about today, you can't ignore the fact that, for instance, Crocodile Dundee, as mildly amusing as it may be, was certainly no classic American film, or Australian film for that matter, but the point is that there wasn't anything else out last year at that time, and it made all the money that there was to be made in that market. It's a lousy movie, but
In any art form.
and that happens, but these anomalies happen. Defender of the Crown eats it. The Amiga version is just not even a game, I mean, practically not even a
Slideshow.
It's awful. But it sold a lot of units because it made a great Amiga demo. If people were buying landfill, if people discovered that, ET cartridges helped grow corn, and were paying premium price for it, they would have sold they would have sold a lot of units. Now, the whole point is that, in designing games, that's part of the pragmatic day-to-day element involved in it. It was part of the reason why coin-op video games died. It was because we were forced into listening to the demands of the operators, which was, give us shorter games. Give us a game that plays a shorter period of time, that throws them off in 45 seconds instead of a minute and a half. And originally it was a minute and a half instead of 3 minutes, which was what pinball games started out at. And that was a big factor. We had to listen to it, and that was a mistake listening to that. So, okay, it goes both ways. But anyway, the point is, Joe's right. You got to worry about the money in the marketplace. That's a big, and especially when evaluating product. When you look at a product and see, gee, why did this do good? You can't just say, well, it did great because it's, obviously if it sold well, there must be some great game design in here. No.
Any art form. You can go for pop 40 hits, or you can, you know,
Yeah,
be a jazz
Friday the
musician
13th.
or a classical musician. You know, I mean, there's a big difference.
The guys in Baltimore, Micro
He-Man,
Pros,
Master of the Universe movies.
helped
you know?
establish a genre of product that many other people now emulate. And a year from now, Cinemaware might be out of business, or there might be 5 other companies doing Cinemaware style product.
I love Jacob.
But what I'm saying is,
It's 2 now.
worse.
like a mirror.
Time is going to
What?
tell by the amount of units sold of that product. Legend of Zelda is truly an interesting, good game that isn't like your standard arcade candy pop. You know, you put your Nintendo, you know, home version of your home best arcade game, and you play it for 2 minutes and it's over. It's a game where you can, like Mario Brothers, get a bit deeper, go a bit longer, and maintain and retain
Like
where you were in the game. You'll probably see 30 games by June. They're like Legend of Zelda in gold packages and gold boxes with battery backed up RAM, because they sold a zillion Legend of Zelda cartridges.
And you'll see it on ported to all the other machines, C64 and PC version.
I disagree.
But the first one who did
But-
Legend of Zelda does a lot better than all the
Exactly.
clones.
Absolutely.
Right.
Operational. Sometimes.
I guarantee there'll be more
Tato
cinema
did
movies
Space
out there.
Invaders.
Like,
Namco did
everybody's
Galaga
everybody's
X
doing
Man.
it.
They're not that dissimilar. If you can take it and elevate it to that next level of color, graphics, sound, gameplay, you know, more rewarding, more whatever, you know, you will then maybe become the market leader.
It's risky. It's always risky inventing things.
Exidy, we talked about it today at lunch. Exidy had a game which Sega ended up copying called Head On. It was a maze with dots, and the car went around eating the dots, except there weren't any power pills to kill the other cars. You had to avoid them. Namco said, dots, instead of the car, we'll put this yellow thing. Said, we'll give you a power pill where you can go destroy the other car as opposed to just avoid them. Had Head On Duel and Vinco. The Sega game, or the Exidy game, was called Crash. Allowed you to run over a gas can. It allowed you to destroy the other car. And the history of games might have been changed by 2 years. It's just a matter of who does it better than the other guy the next time. I mean, there were lots of wrestling games until you guys came out with yours.
Yeah, that's not necessarily true.
Because
but
there's truly successful
it
people
would have
rehash
been true.
what's out there and improve it, or, I mean, some people, it could be argued there's just as much money to come up with something new and innovative.
If you like,
That's how saturated the market
let's say I like a flying game. Let's say I like a driving game. And if I have learned transferable skills, I learned to drive, I've learned to fly. If I learn to fly the Microsoft Flight Simulator, and 3 years from now, incredible technology comes out with a game that gives you the same controls on the keyboard, same left, the same right, the same up, the same down, but it's better, faster, more dynamic, sounds better, moves quicker, takes you more places, is more exciting, but I still know how to control the keyboard. You'll probably sell a ton of them.
Flight Simulator is actually a key candidate for being outmoded just by technology. You know, if you got a better machine that runs a better looking flight simulator, you know.
The driving games are always like
And it
that.
plays
They're
just as well.
match a pedal.
Well, they're also safe. They're definitely safe. things
I
to
mean,
do.
you know, the market, I think you have to always do unique and innovative things, and you also have to do product to make money.
There's a lot of flight simulators, yeah, that's true. I've made a lot of money since the Microsoft Flight Simulator, but I still don't think any of them have matched the original, as far as money
Never
being
will
brought
be.
in.
Maybe in terms of money, you know.
Granted, there's a lot less effort
There's
in-
an expression out there, being the first in the marketplace.
They
You
claim
own
to
a
have sold over
marketplace,
a
you become
million.
a leader, you're something that everyone compares against. You know, if Microsoft was out there for 2 years before somebody else came out with another product, there's a gigantic base of people that got into that product. You know, I went over
Well,
to my
it is
friend's
some
house,
guys.
he had one, I liked it, I'm gonna either
Yeah, but I
get
think
a
it was
copy
out
or
longer
go
than
buy
that.
one.
Guys from Champaign must have written that program now 40 times. They're
They're
getting good at it.
They're getting real good at it.
It's a balance. It's a
Ported
trade-off.
over every machine.
You know, if you invent something new, you've got novelty going for you. If you don't, but you're also running the risk that people aren't going to want what you've invented.
But movies are the
Yeah, when
same
you
way.
copy,
Yeah,
movies
they're
are
risk
actually.
I mean, look at Woody Allen. Woody Allen puts out darn good movies.
Albert
They're
Brooks.
seldom commercial successes.
They're not failures, though.
They're not failures.
They're all
They're
successes,
Sustain
they're
it,
not runaway
but
hits.
they're not Star Wars. And let's, you know,
No.
but they're great movies.
No, but they're good
They're
return
hits.
on investment.
Right.
They're safe.
And
they're
they'll-
very safe.
You had an
and
investment
before the
director.
movie goes into production, he sells it to HBO for rights. He sells the the Canon Home Video the rights. So before they ever finish the movie, it's already paid for all of its production.
And if you're an investor, who are you going to invest in? Woody Allen, or are you gonna, would you rather invest in the next Woody Allen film or the next George Lucas film at this point?
Woody Allen.
Woody Allen.
We know the next
Right?
Lucas
Think about that. Well, even if you didn't know that, looking at Labyrinth and these other ones.
How many
What would you
football
go
games are out there? NFL football, this football, even in the arcade business. Tecmo came out with the 2-screen football game. It's making $1,200 a week in arcades. Though it's just another football game, maybe it's a little bit.
I feel like we have these people on two sides of the table. So it's great. So
Well,
there's like market driven, and then there's like product.
Well, that's probably the best thing to do is find the fine line between both.
Yeah, there's
Because you
artistic
can't ignore
success,
either side.
I
commercial
think you have to make
success,
your money.
and it's hard to find
And
something
then
that
you
both.
can, I mean, I would like to count, and I only think I need this hand to count how many people have made their money and done it with dignity as a programmer. Okay, I mean, there are people who have done. I mean, there's
Music,
no budge.
art, anything. When you think about it.
No, that's true in most fields. That's true.
Herbie Hancock was a dual personality. Maybe
Didn't a lot of artists die paupers, not appreciated?
Most.
Really?
Certainly a lot of musicians.
Really? Oh, Jesus.
That's what I prefer to.
Damn.
Yeah, I usually have to die before.
We want to kill you tonight, Tim, so we can appreciate you.
Thanks.
So when you die,
Probably what it would take.
You have
you
such
die,
a rip-off
people will
following just in this room.
Tim, that field of telemarketing is still open.
I know, I was thinking about driving the big rigs. But,
Lincoln Tech.
There you go. That's where I'm going.
And when you're done driving them, we'll teach you how to fix those diesel motors.
Actually, I do have one concrete question. Let's go back to that 1968 Expo. And you've got that really horrible, dorky movie. Okay. Well, in fact, what you have is said 12 decision points. Yeah. Okay, that's like 4,096 dorky movies, but.
No, because they folded back on themselves.
Oh yeah.
They all-
But you're still
there.
there.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, 24 segments, 12 decision points, 496 movies.
Right. Okay, so let's suppose that you're back here. Okay, now let's suppose that we replace everybody in the audience except you with fabulous algorithms, which brilliantly simulate the aesthetic judgments of each and every one of those audience members. And when you sit down and you enter your data, when you say how you want it to go, and the computer goes, think, as it calculates the responses of all those audience members and comes back to you and says, okay, here's what happens. Is it a better movie? It's a better computer game. Actually, what I'm really...
with 4,096 choices, it never had a chance.
Yeah.
You could replace it with gerbils or anything.
No, I don't need an answer. This is sort of like, what's the sound of one hand clapping? I mean,
What is that sound?
My answer. That's the sound guy.
That's the sound guy.
It's a sound icon.
I think the answer is that the output has to be as rich and varied as, in terms of its possibilities, as possible. There's something to consider and fold into your blend. But, I mean, for instance, if Balance of Power only had 4 responses, you win, the Russians have just declared nuclear war. The Russians don't declare nuclear war. Name 2 others. But if that was always the response, no matter how much, fabulous processing is going on in there, if it all tapered that down, then, it wouldn't be as good.
Well, it in fact does. There are only 3 possible outcomes to Balance of Power.
Yeah.
There are a billion ways of getting there,
Right.
but there are only 3. I win, Russians win, assuming I played the Americans, or blow up the world.
Yeah, you could. I could.
Well, but
I
consider that as an
outcome.
That's not
different
so bad.
story.
That's not so bad. I am talking about the fact that in balance. Well, really, I mean, if I were really being critical, and I'm not, honestly. because I'm perfectly willing to just take your word for it that you put a lot of effort into these equations and that they have real deep significance and that they produce this rich output. And from what I've seen at the data tables, there's certainly enough varied responses to make that plausible. But on the other hand, I would posit that if it weren't for you being the guy who wrote those equations, I would wager you that I could sit down, write a version of balance of power that used the same data tables, but which used simpler routines that lean more heavily on the use of random numbers, and produce a version of the game which was not specifically the same, but to the user, pretty much indistinguishable.
Depends on how good the user is. See, I did sweat a lot of details. In playtesting, I'd go back and say, wait a minute, you can't have a coup d'etat in Pakistan, that just wouldn't happen. Go back and check it out. There'd be a lot of places. For example, the Apple II balance of power, which has many flaws in the execution, nobody has ever complained about. Yet, when I was demoing it in front of a group of people, I was standing here, and so you can see, and I turned and I looked at the screen, and there was this long pause while I said to myself, there was a revolution in China? That's absurd. My algorithms don't do that.
But your algorithms don't do that.
But you're right, the audience didn't know. The audience would say, oh yeah, revolution in China.
So my point is that your audience, I mean the player, might in fact enjoy the game more if you didn't have to sit there and wait for 30 seconds. On the other hand, they may in fact be enjoying it more because they have the illusion, the proper illusion, I mean it's fact.
It's not an illusion, it's reality.
It is reality. That the machine
They're
is
really using their computer for the first time ever.
There was a.
It depends on the level of player.
There was an article.
I mean, I like it. I prefer to watch it fade.
Somebody really into that. Wait, how many are there?
Actually, 6 hours ago or so, when you brought this,
I was going to say,
up,
there's an article about it when Radio Shack had their
slow it down.
chess simulator. Originally, it was this: you make your move and it went blam. You make your move and it went blam, and then finally I said, wait a minute.
We got to make this thing look like it's thinking.
Look like it's thinking like you've done something to make the machine ponder.
I had one that would say ply 2, ply 3, ply 4, and you'd feel the computer. You would hurt. Your brain would hurt because the computer was now in ply 6, you know, and then finally it would give you a solution. Beep, 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 beep. It would show me what it would do.
Actually, I had a reason for asking that other than just, trying to put you in a hard spot. When you were talking earlier about behavior, about determinism versus, randomness, I'm a great believer in
That's
that.
actually, I want to stop you because I just interject. This is exactly the point that I was trying to bring up when I said 6 hours ago.
Yeah.
So the first time you mentioned that and you wanted to come to the others, it just said and was 7.
Yeah.
That'd do it.
Yeah.
And if you want to, you limit the randomness, just and the
okay.
And it was 7.
When you get into,
I'm done.
But when you get into complex systems, the outcome is not predictable easily in a trivial fashion by, but if it was, Challenger would have blown up. That was a result of, extremely complex systems. And the more complex they are, it increases in quite, huge fashion. That's why, even if this is a deterministic world, it certainly has the appearance of being, free will, random to everybody. It's just because it transcends, our ability to trace back to thinking. In other words,
for all practical purposes, it's random.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I understand you're wanting to limit the output of balance of power to those events which would only plausibly happen now. I would argue with
or at least in your mind.
Or the player's mind. Or the player's mind. For instance, it could be argued that the Soviets would never shoot down a Korean commercial jet airliner. Which is why I actually have some argument with guys sitting on some corner making these big simulators trying to predict the future with them. But there are just times when, what the hell, roll the dice, Chuck.
Look at Monopoly, for God's
sake. You can pump out, but I'm just suggesting that in your own equations, rather than necessarily going a completely deterministic route, the determinism has a big, physics has a big element of, weighing random values, just saying that, this has a very small percentage of happening, but it happened.
Well, this is one thing probability can do for you. It can roll the dice.
Yeah.
the first game I ever wrote a long time ago was I took a board game that was a horse race game, and I found it very annoying to roll the dice, look up on the table, see how many moves I got, all that crap. So I had a trash idiot at the house for some reason. I won't admit to buying it. And in BASIC, I programmed this thing that knew about the game board and knew how to roll the dice.
Please take care of this computer. It's crying.
And that was a reasonably good thing for the computer to do. It made playing this game more fun. I automated some annoying functions of it, and that was a perfectly good use for the computer.
Well, not unlike in painting too, is that like dithering or generating random.
It was a board game assist.
Random fields. Creates interest, to the eye. And I think when we're talking about the richness of the output, I don't see any reason why the abilities of the computer can't be enhanced by, giving it, an opportunity to randomize. In other words, you could write equations so you're blue in the face that would never predict that damn airliner would get shot down. But if you had a random number in there that at least allowed for that somewhere down the pipe, what the hell?
Well, maybe there was a perversion of the Arthur Clarke saying any process sufficiently complex appears to be random.
Well, I think chances are with all these equations.
Well, it's more like Stephen Hawking saying anything, including a bounce set of encyclopedias, can come out
technology sufficiently advanced appears to be magic.
I
was just perverting.
He plugged them into the equation.
Okay. So then you can turn that around and say, well, if they appear to be random,
why not use magic?
Right.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I like that.
I think that's solid.
You're a chess player. Deep down inside, he's a chess player.
No.
One question I've been itching to ask about that. Are you still in contact with your friend?